Hello, my darlings. I hope you guys are doing well. I miss all of you so much. I can't even tell you how much I miss being in the classroom with you guys. It's been pretty horrible not getting to hang out with you guys. So I hope that all of you are doing well and at least staying sane. If not, always feel free to reach out to me or another one of your teachers or somebody else at school. Because, we know that this is horrible. And if you're struggling with classes and getting stuff done and all of that good stuff, make sure that you're talking to us so we can, help you as best as we possibly can. Because if we're struggling as much as we are, we know that you guys are also struggling. So just, keep that in mind. Okay, today I'm going to go through how exactly to shade a curl. So last time we went in and we drew a curl, used the lines and everything. I had a curl over here for you guys as an example that had those outlines on the edges that helped me draw it. If you guys want to keep that on your curl, you're welcome to do that. I think it's kind of distracting when we're talking about the shading and all those different values that you want. So I removed that from this curl and then drew another one. But if you do want to keep that, you're welcome to do that as well. It doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go in and really look at all of these different values that I have. I'm also going to look at the angle of my highlights and pay attention to how your highlight ends at the edge of each curl, right? It's not a circle. It's still the shape of whatever it is that you're shading. Okay, I also want to pay attention to where I've got those little baby highlights going on and where I've got some of those shadows that are kind of curving in those elbows of those curls. And then I also want to pay attention to my shadows down here too. All right, I also am cheating a little bit. It's really hard for me to see where this curl is when I'm recording because my camera is above what I can see. So I'm working off of my computer over here. I just took a picture of this guy, but if it does start to look a little bit wonky, that's probably why. So just bear with me on that. Okay, so when I'm shading, first thing I really like to do is I like to go in and just shade the front of each of my curls. So I want to look at where I've got that shading on the top, and then I also want to look at where I've got it on the bottom. Okay, it's not really all that terribly dark because it's white on white, right? So if we don't have that intense of a value scale, you can always use what's called artistic license and go in and make something better than what it is in real life. So that's probably what I'll do. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to look kind of where exactly those values start, where they end, the angle that they're at, all that good stuff. So pretty much with this guy, my highlight is straight across. So if I kind of look at this, it's literally straight across. And I want to keep it going straight across. It's not perfectly in line with those two lines I've got on my curl. It goes literally straight with my paper. So I want to keep it there. Okay, and then I've got my hand back super far up on my pencil because when I go in and start to draw, I want to make sure that I don't have a lot of pressure at all because it's harder to take away than it is to add. Always remember that. So I'm going to go in and just lightly start adding some value. And I'm just kind of doing a little scribbly thing. And I'm just kind of pulling it down towards my highlight. And then remember, when you get closer and closer to your highlight, you want to get lighter and lighter. All right, I'll leave it there-ish. And then I'm going to come back down and add a little bit down on the bottom too. And guys, remember that you can always fast forward on these videos. You don't have to sit here and watch it second by second and listen to me talk. If you want to speed ahead, you are welcome to do that. Or if you want to sit here with me, God, I can't talk still. If you want to sit here with me and listen to me fail at talking, you're welcome to do that as well. All right, so I've got a little bit of shading, not too terribly much going on, but see how I'm trying to keep that highlight straight? So right now I don't really have, it's kind of, following the lines of the curl. So I want to fix that a little bit. So I want to bring in this shading that I've got up here, pull that down a little bit, and then pull this shading up a little bit. And then that's gonna, oh God, that was so dark. But that'll go in and kind of straighten that little highlight out a little bit. I'm gonna kind of dab with my eraser to pick up that super aggressively dark mark that I just made. Not cute. All right, so pretty light shading so far. I'll probably go back in and intensify that later, but right now I'm not really gonna concentrate on it. Okay, then I wanna go in and I wanna look at the top of this curl, because that's still technically the front of a curl. And then I wanna look at like the top of this little bottom curl over here too, because that's also the front. So this one's a little bit easier for me to see. I can see that there's some shading up top over here. Not too terribly much, but I also want to look at the angle that that highlight is at. So unlike this highlight that's kind of straight across like with my paper, this highlight pretty much goes exactly at the same angle that the edge of that paper does. So I want to keep it there. So I'm pretty much just going to go in and just kind of like go across the back a little bit and kind of edge off that corner. And then I'll just kind of like leave the tip of that pretty nice and bright. Okay, this guy on the other hand, he barely has any highlight at the tip up over here. So I'm just kind of gonna leave that mostly. And then add some down over here. So I'll kind of start to like do a little bit of a gradient scale on this guy, not too terribly much, but a little bit. And slowly pull some of those darker values back up. And then just that little tiny corner is what I was saying I was gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave just that itty bitty tiny little corner alone, not really do much to him. All right, so I've kind of got the front of my curl shaded a little bit. It's obviously pretty rough, and I even like colored outside the lines right there, which is driving me crazy, but oh well. All right, so from here, I can go in and I can either refine the shading on the front of my curl, or I can go back in and kind of like add a little bit of the shading on kind of what I call the elbows of the curl, and then also like the valleys of my curl. I like to go in and kind of like get all of the shading down first and then go back and refine it, because that's gonna make it a little bit easier to kind of keep everything cohesive when you're shading. If we were actually doing like our full project where we do multiple curls, you guys would notice how that happens. Like if you do different curls, like shade all of one curl at one time and then move on to the next one, your shading changes by the end. So we want to kind of do all of it at the same time and move on like in steps. Okay, so now I'm going to go up and I want to look at this little elbow right here. So it kind of has some shading that comes down to about right here, not too terribly much. And it gets a little bit darker at that elbow, but I'm not gonna pay attention to like this whole shadow that's like going on there. I'm gonna leave that literally until the end. So I'm just shading that like little elbow right there. And it's not too much shading either. And again, I wanna pay attention to the angle that it's sitting at. And just add like a tiny little bit in that elbow up there. And then just kind of like gently pull that down with barely any value. Okay, then I'm looking at this valley over here. This valley literally like barely has any shading at all whatsoever or any shadows. But it does have a tiny, tiny little bit that's down over here, and then it reaches just a tiny bit over here. So I'm gonna go in and do that like with barely any value at all, and just kind of like pull that across. Just got darker than I wanted to. Cool. And then remember, if you get too dark, you can go back in and kind of like pick that up by just like dabbing your eraser at that. Lovely. Then I want to go back over and look at the valley that's over here on this edge of the curl. Again, pretty much nothing within that valley. It's mostly just that shadow that you can see. So I would probably just leave that alone 100%. especially since, see how like this line over here almost completely disappears? If you've got a line or an edge of your curl that's disappearing, it doesn't really need any shading because it should, like in real life, look like it's just going away. On my curl, I have a couple spots where that is, but I outlined them pretty dark so you guys could see exactly what I was doing without any difficulty of like losing that line and all that stuff. Okay, but I do have a tiny little bit of shading like right in here. Again, just a tiny, tiny little bit. So I would start on like the elbow down here and then just gently pull it up. So just a tiny little bit and then just barely, barely pull it up. Kind of like that. Sweet. Now I'm gonna go back into the front of that big curl right there, and I'm gonna make him way more intense. I wanna get almost a full value scale on my curl, so obviously I'm not gonna have the darkest values on my actual paper curl. It'll be down here in my shadows, but I do wanna have like some of that curl be a lot darker so it really pops off the page and looks better than it does in real life. Okay, so I'm gonna go back in and start to darken that edge a little bit. Again, I'm not gonna get too crazy at the beginning because why? It's always easier to add more than to take it away. So that farthest area away from my highlight, that's what I'm gonna make the darkest up here. And then I don't want to make it like too dark when I'm getting closer to that highlight because I still want to have that nice gradient blend going of like darker to lighter. So again, when I get back to that highlight, I'm either going to stop with those lighter values or I'm going to blend it out just a little bit more. You really, really want your highlight to be nice and bright though, because otherwise it's going to get like a little bit murky and not really look like a piece of paper anymore. It's just kind of going to look like a, I don't know, a dirty worm, which isn't really what we want, right? So be respectful of your highlight. And then I keep getting darker in that one little area. I don't know how I feel about this pencil. I thought it was cool because it says, oh yeah, on it. Oh yeah. But no, I'm not digging it. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you just get a crappy pencil and then it helps you make crappy art. I can only imagine how many of you are using mechanical pencils right now though, which literally hurts my heart. And I'm sure some of you are like, why? Shading with mechanicals is fine. No, it's not. Okay, so now we can kind of start to see that curve of that like curl coming together a little bit more, but you can definitely see that jump like right here in between those values. So I would want to go back in and just kind of like blend that out a little bit so you can't see that like aggressive jump from one value to the next. That didn't really help. Sure, that helped a little bit. Okay, so then I can go back into a couple other areas that also have that stuff going on. I can make this elbow up here just a little bit darker and kind of blend that down. Maybe I want to make it like this bottom valley of this guy a little bit darker. Just make it a little bit more extreme. I could do that. I could make like this little curve down here a little bit darker. Maybe I want to make this little curve up here a little bit darker. and I just really kind of want it to pop. I like my pencil drawings to be a little bit more dramatic. I think I've told you that, guys, or told you guys that before. So I like to really have like some darker areas that make everything kind of like pop and really like shoot forward towards you. If you guys like it to be a little bit lighter, that's okay. Just make sure that you do still have a little bit of that drama going on that makes it look good. Okay, so at this point, typically I would go in with my Tortillion and I would kind of darken or not darken, good Lord. I would smooth everything out. But if I did that, this video would probably be like 45 minutes long, which I'm sure you guys don't want. So when you're using your Tortillion, just make sure that you're starting at your lighter values and going to the darker areas. If you go reverse, you pick up all of that graphite in those dark areas and then you drag it into your highlight. You do not want a murky highlight. If you have a murky highlight, everything is going to look like crap in the end. Don't do that. Just don't. Okay. Couple areas I want to go in and work on before I go into my shadows are like these areas where I went in and like drew outside of the line. Maybe a couple areas where I've got like a little bit of weird smudginess going on. Something. And just kind of like clean that up a little bit for when I'm using my shadows or drawing my shadows. Okay, so we have two different types of shadows that we want to focus on. Our first one is our primary shadow. So our primary shadow is like the darkest area, and that's usually going to be like where either a piece of paper is touching another piece of paper or where it's like literally like sitting down on the table. You can really only see a primary shadow a little bit like right here on this little edge where it gets super dark, or right here on this tiny little edge where it gets super dark too. Maybe a tiny little bit over here, but not really. The lights that I have in my new house are not conducive to drawing at all. I need some kind of new fancy lights. But we'll figure that out eventually. Which, by the way, thank you guys for being so patient with me moving. I know. It was not a good time to move. It took me like a week. Okay, so I'm gonna go in, I think I'll draw this guy first. So I wanna pay attention to like where this little like J-ish looking thing is kind of swooping out from, like where exactly on the curl, and then I wanna pay attention to the angle that it's at as well. And I'm just gonna draw the shape first, I'm not gonna draw anything else. So if I look at where it's coming out, it's kind of coming out close to this line right here that I had drawn, but maybe just a tiny bit further. So I'll probably start at like right about here. And then it really kind of like swoops over. Kind of sharp. And having that shadow that kind of like swoops up and over like that, that's gonna give you like a mimic of whatever the curve is on your curl. So having that is a good thing. Okay, then just like when we were drawing the curls, when I have that direction change or something, it's going to be straight. So in your shadows, the majority of your lines are just going to be straight lines. So I'm gonna take that lovely little swoop, and then I'm going to go straight and just kind of like mimic this line a little bit, this one. And then I want to pay attention to where that shadow ends. So it ends like almost perfectly in line with this line. So if I was going to go down and just like continue this line, that's pretty much where that shadow would go to. And so that's what I'm going to do. It does kind of look like it curves a little bit though, so I want to go in and kind of mimic that curve just a little bit. And then he pretty much just like comes up and like meets like the crease of that paper up there. Okay, so when you're going in and like coloring in your shadows, you really only want to make your primary shadows as dark as possible, because otherwise it's going to look like way too much intense shadowing. So I would go with like a medium-ish value just to start. And then if you guys want to go in and like make your shadows darker, you're absolutely welcome to do that. And I would probably go in and do that on mine, like right at the bottom where that curl and the table are meeting, because otherwise I don't really have that much separation. So I would go in and just kind of like add that a little bit, and it can make it look like it's one of those like primary shadows I was talking about, if you want to do that, or you can just kind of leave it how it is. I don't know if you guys can tell when I'm drawing. It looks like it's kind of reflecting a little bit. Oh well. Anyway. Okay, next one I'll draw is I'll draw this one. So when you have a shadow that's like sitting over on top of a piece of paper, you don't want to like color it in really, really dark. You want it to be a little bit lighter. And then when it stops and hits that table, that's when you want it to be darker. So I'll go in and kind of like make this shadow shape a little bit lighter. And then when I hit down here, I'll probably make my pencil marks just a little bit darker. Okay, so it kind of comes up and over. And down over here. And then this line is literally just like following the shape of the curl. So then I'll just go ahead and follow the shape of the curl too. Then we've got that straight line over here. And then it's just going to connect back up into this guy. Yeah, ish. I would probably go back in and like refine this little edge up here. And then I'll go ahead and shade him in. And remember that shadow that's on top of your paper, you don't want it to be that insanely dark. It can be dark-ish, but don't make it like as dark as possible. And then when I hit the table, I can go back in and make it a little bit darker if I want to. And I would probably make it like a shade or two darker. So see how this primary value is kind of like sitting there and like separating things? I would probably go in and make that primary value a little bit darker, or that primary shadow a little bit darker, just so it can kind of like pop out under that other shadow and just make it a little bit more interesting. And I'd probably refine this guy right here too. Just make it look a little bit prettier. Okay. So from there, I've got one more shadow left, and it's just this guy right here, which literally kind of looks like a little bit of a curved rectangle. But I want to pay attention to like where it starts compared to like the edge of the curl. So if I'm looking at like the corner of the curl, it's kind of up over here. I know it's kind of hard for you guys to see, but then it kind of starts a little bit inside and like curves a little bit and almost hits this guy. So that's what I want to draw. Is I'm going to start inside this just a little bit. And it kind of curves a little bit, not too much. Gets close to that line right there. And then it goes out and over. Probably should have made it a little bit thinner, but oh well. I didn't. And then I'll go ahead and pull this guy over. Looks like the shape of my curl changed a little bit, so I'll teach you guys how to fix that. And then it just kind of connects down right here. So again, wherever I'm coloring in that shadow on the paper, I'm not going to make it super duper dark. All right, and then I'm gonna go in and make the part outside of the curl just a little bit darker. And then if you guys really look hard, do you kind of see how there's like that primary shadow that kind of goes out in a little bit of a triangle? I wanna go back in and I wanna add that. So it comes up along the line of my curl and then it kind of comes up in a little bit of a triangle right there. And I want to keep that and just kind of like make it a little bit more realistic. Okay, so as I'm looking at this, I think it's really kind of boring. I want to go back in and make things just a little bit darker, a little bit more intense. So I would go back in and I would definitely like darken some of this guy up. Kind of separate it from some of those shadows a little bit, maybe even darken some of my shading like really intensely. And just kind of improve it as I go. And then I could darken this shadow up a little bit. Maybe I want to like add a little bit more value coming down from up in this elbow a tiny bit. Maybe I want to darken this guy a little bit, or I want to lighten that highlight on the tip just a tiny bit. Can go in and brighten that up. Okay, just little tiny things that I would go in and really fix on this guy to make it look a lot better. And then also I'm looking at this again because when I drew it earlier, it did kind of like curve over like that, but now it looks like how tight my curl is loosening. So it kind of went away. So to fix that, what I would do is I would go in and just kind of shade it exactly like I did over here. And just add some shading up top here. And make sure that there's a little bit more up there in that elbow. And then I would probably add another primary shadow that kind of comes down off of this little curve right here. And comes down and out just a little bit. So it really makes it look like there's another shadow coming down from that curve. Yeah. Ish. I would probably go back in and really fix this in some more areas, but for right now, it's not bad at all. I know it took me like 30 minutes to do it, but I mean, ish. You guys can definitely make it look better if you take more time on it. You don't rush through it. You use a tortillon, all of that good stuff. Okay, but if I'm looking at like those two next to each other, not too horrible, right? I made the like values a little bit better, a little bit more intense, but I can definitely go back in and make it better, which is what you guys want to do. This is by far the longest and hardest lesson that you're gonna have while we're doing e-learning. So try to put in that energy into this because this teaches you so much. Mastering this skill teaches you so much, I promise. Okay, that's all I have for you guys. Make sure that you are turning your work in, turn it in. If you are struggling, talk to me and we can figure something out. Okay, but you have got to make sure that we're getting this stuff done because there's no reason you guys shouldn't be passing my class. All right, guys, have a good day. Have a good rest of the week and the weekend and all that good stuff. I will talk to you later. Bye.